How to Get Rich by Felix Dennis. Introduction. Imagine you're 25 years old. It's a bitter winter night in London, and the city is dark. The electricity has been cut off in your tiny flat for weeks because you can't afford to pay the bill. The only light comes from a small fire you're feeding with broken pieces of furniture scavenged from the trash. Sitting beside you on a battered beanbag is the person you love. The food you just ate, she bought. The cigarettes you're smoking, she paid for. And now, softly, cautiously, she begins to persuade you. She tells you to take the decent job offer you've received. To give up on this crazy, hopeless dream of starting your own business. She reminds you that you're still young, that you can always try again later. She tells you she hates to see you like this, miserable, bad-tempered, spinning your wheels in a quest that's going nowhere. And in that moment, you nearly crack. You love her, and you know you'll lose her if you refuse. It would be so easy to say yes. To promise her you'll get a normal job, earn a normal salary, and live a normal life. So easy to give in. But you don't. Something inside you, a stubborn, unyielding fire, refuses to be extinguished. You know, with a certainty that defies all logic, that if you give in now, you will never get another chance. It is now, or it is never. That young man, shivering by the fire, was Felix Dennis. And the decision he made that night was the first step on a journey that would take him from being a broke, hippie dropout on welfare to a self-made tycoon with a net worth of nearly $1 billion. So why would a man who achieved such staggering wealth waste his time writing a book to help other people get rich? It wasn't for the money. He already had more than he could ever spend. No, the reason he wrote How to Get Rich is because he believed that almost anyone of reasonable intelligence can become wealthy, provided they have one thing: not a great idea, not a fancy education, not even startup capital, but a fierce, unrelenting, and almost inhuman compulsion to succeed. Today, we are going to walk the narrow, lonely road that Felix Dennis laid out. This isn't a journey for the faint of heart. It's a brutally honest look at the sacrifices, the mindset, and the cold, hard rules of a game that very few are willing to play. By the end of our time together, you will understand the one uncomfortable truth that separates those who merely wish for wealth from those who are utterly determined to achieve it, no matter the cost. Book summary. Most books about wealth begin with a promise of happiness. They tell you that money will solve your problems, ease your burdens, and bring you peace of mind. Felix Dennis begins his book by telling you the exact opposite. He says, flatly, that becoming rich will almost certainly not make you happy. In fact, he warns that it's more likely to impose the opposite condition. The stress of acquiring wealth, the strain of protecting it, and the guilt that often comes with it, are not ingredients for a contented life. He quotes the author James Baldwin, who said, "Money, it turned out, was exactly like sex. You thought of nothing else if you didn't have it, and thought of other things if you did." So if getting rich doesn't guarantee happiness, why on earth should you pursue it? For Dennis, the answer is a single, priceless commodity: time. Time is the only thing worth fussing about in life. Time to do what you want, when you want, with whomever you want. Time to walk in the woods, to read, to travel on a whim, to commission art, or to write poetry, as he famously did in his later years. Time is the freedom from having to be in a particular place, on a particular day, doing a particular thing, just to pay the rent. That is the true prize. The money is just the tool you use to win it. But before you can even begin the journey, you have to confront what Dennis calls the 800-pound gorilla that stands in your way. It's the King Kong of your nightmares, and it's the single biggest reason most people never even start. That gorilla is the fear of failure. We all feel it. It's the voice that whispers all the reasons why something can't be done. It's the committee in your own mind that analyzes every risk until you're paralyzed by caution. It's the fear of what your friends, your family, and your neighbors will think if you try and fall flat on your face. Dennis tells a story from early in his career. In the late 1970s, he was interested in launching a personal computer magazine. It was a new, unproven market. He spoke to a senior manager at a major retailer, an old, well-meaning gentleman who warned him over and over that nobody would ever pay money to read monthly magazines about dinky little computers. His own colleagues agreed. After weeks of discussion, paralyzed by doubt, Dennis abandoned the plan. Shortly after, another entrepreneur launched the exact same kind of magazine. It was an immediate success. Dennis was forced to scramble and buy a majority stake in that magazine just to get back in the game, a move that ultimately cost him millions in lost profits. The price of listening to fear, he calculated, was nearly $10 million. The lesson is brutal. If you are unwilling to fail, sometimes publicly, sometimes catastrophically, you have almost no chance of ever getting rich. You must grow a carapace, a mental armor thick enough to shrug off the sniggering and mockery that will follow your failures, and the envy that will accompany your success. Because those three things, mockery, envy, and failure, are certainties in life. You either learn to harness that fear, to make it a motivator instead of an obstacle, or you are doomed to remain relatively poor. This brings us to one of the book's most foundational and controversial ideas. To get rich, you must fundamentally change your relationship with the world around you. Specifically, you must understand that team spirit is a concept designed for losers. Financially speaking, of course. Dennis argues that team spirit is the glue that binds employees together, the methodology employers use to shackle useful people to their desks without having to pay them what they're truly worth. While you are working for someone else, you must see it for what it is: a reconnaissance expedition. An apprenticeship. It is a means to an end, not an end in itself. In your secret heart, you must understand that you are not part of the team. You are a lone wolf, gathering intelligence, learning the terrain, and waiting for the right moment to strike out on your own. He tells a fantastic story to illustrate this. In the early 1980s, he launched a pop music magazine in America called Star Hits. The editor was a brilliant young man named Neil Tennant. The magazine took off like a rocket, and Neil found himself at the center of the New York music scene. He had a dream job, interviewing rock stars, flying around the world, and running one of the hottest magazines in the country. The office morale was sky high. Everyone was part of a tight-knit, passionate team. One afternoon, Neil walked into Dennis's office holding a cassette tape. He said, "Felix, I'm going to leave Star Hits. I've been working on some music, and I think I have a real chance." Dennis was stunned. He tried everything to convince him to stay. He offered him more money. He talked about the magazine's bright future. And then, he played the final card. He reminded Neil how disappointed and let down his editorial team would be. The team he had built. The team that depended on him. Neil wasn't swayed. He knew that team spirit was a feeble reason to abandon his own ambition. He left, and a short time later, he and his band, the Pet Shop Boys, became global superstars. He even made the front cover of Star Hits in his own right, just as he had promised he would. The lesson is this: if you want to be rich, your loyalty must be to your own path. Those who can never be rich may not, subconsciously, want you to become rich either. Your success highlights their own lack of risk-taking. You cannot be one of the boys or believe that you and your boss are in this together. If you do, you will only ever succeed at making other people rich. This mindset is critical, because once you've cut loose from the pack, you face your next great challenge, the search. What business do you actually go into? Where is the money? Here, Dennis reveals another great fallacy that traps aspiring entrepreneurs: the myth of the great idea. He says it plainly: ideas are worthless. Good ideas are a dime a dozen. In fact, they're more like a penny a dozen. We've all had them. A clever app, a new kind of service, a solution to a common problem. But ideas, on their own, will never make you rich. Execution is 1,000 times more important. If the execution is perfect, it sometimes barely matters what the idea is. The world is full of people who had a great idea and are now broke. And it's equally full of people who took a simple, even boring, idea and executed it with relentless perfection, and are now fantastically wealthy. Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's, did not invent the hamburger. He didn't even invent the idea of fast food. There were thousands of burger joints in America when he started. What he did was execute a simple plan with obsessive focus: standardize the food, franchise the outlets, ensure cleanliness and speed, and market the experience relentlessly. It was the implementation, not the idea, that built an empire. Dennis is ruthless on this point. If you want to get rich, do not sit around waiting for inspiration to strike. Just get busy getting rich. This leads to a powerful corollary: if your own ideas are not the key, then you should never be ashamed to emulate the winning ideas of others. He calls the failure to do this the "it wasn't invented here" syndrome, and it's one of the biggest reasons companies fail. He shares a painful story of his own. In the 1990s, the video game magazine market was exploding. A rival company, Future Publishing, came up with two brilliant strategies. First, they paid huge sums to secure the rights to be the official magazine for platforms like the Sony PlayStation. Second, they started bagging their magazines with a free, playable game on a disc. Dennis found the idea of publishing a magazine he didn't truly own, one licensed from a hardware giant, to be off-putting. He also balked at paying millions in advances. So, his company, Dennis Publishing, stuck to producing unofficial magazines. They tried to compete, but they couldn't get the top-tier games for their cover discs. Readers didn't care about the magazine's content as much as they cared about the free game in the bag. The result was a bloodbath. Future Publishing wiped the floor with them. For years, Dennis's company bled money, stubbornly trying to make their own strategy work, refusing to admit that their rival had found the winning formula. They were pasted, he says, because they refused to emulate. The original is not always the greatest. If you want to be rich, watch your rivals, and when they find a winning strategy, copy it, improve on it, and execute it with more ferocity than they can. So, you have the right mindset. You're focused on execution, not just ideas. Now comes the most difficult part of getting started: obtaining capital. Dennis is brutally honest about this phase. He calls it the worst part of the whole business of getting rich. Nothing, he says, is more humiliating or debilitating than trudging around with your hand out, asking for money. Everyone who starts from nothing has to do it, and everyone hates it. This exhausting and miserable search is what separates the wannabes from the gonnabes. He outlines the primary sources of capital. There are the sharks, credit cards, and high-interest lenders. He warns to avoid these like the plague. Then there are the dolphins, venture capitalists. They'll give you money, but at a steep price. They demand a huge chunk of your company and are obsessed with a quick sale, or flipping the deal, to satisfy their own investors. Doing business with them is a deal with the devil. You might make your first million, but you'll make them many, many more, and you will almost certainly lose control of your own destiny. So where did Felix Dennis get his start? He swam with the fishes. The fishes are the small, often overlooked sources of capital: friends, relatives, suppliers, vendors, ex-employers, and friendly bank managers. They are the people who might be willing to help, not with huge sums, but with small acts of trust that can collectively create the seed capital you need. His own story is a masterclass in this. In 1972, he started his first publishing company with £100. He had no money to pay his lawyer, so he charmed him into helping. He persuaded a friend to join him as a director with almost no salary. They liberated office furniture from a defunct magazine. He sold his personal record collection to get just enough cash to get printers to talk to him. But the printers wouldn't print his first comic book without a guarantee of payment. This was the big stumbling block. So he went to his distributors, a small company run by two men named Brian and Charlie. He asked them to write a letter to the printer. The letter didn't guarantee payment, but it promised that the printer would be the first person paid from the sales revenue. It was a simple gesture of trust. It was enough. The printer agreed. The comic was published, and though it barely made a cent, it provided the framework for his next venture. Within 2 years, he had £60,000 in the bank. He had created capital out of thin air by swimming with the fishes. Most importantly, he still owned 100% of his company. This brings us to what Dennis calls the only real secret to getting rich. It's not a strategy. It's not a tactic. It's a 3-word mantra that he believes is the absolute, non-negotiable core of wealth creation. Ownership. 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 To become rich, you must be an owner. And you must try to own it all. You must strive with every fiber of your being to own and retain control of as close to 100% of any company you create as you possibly can. Every single percentage point is crucial. It is worth fighting for, tooth and claw. This, he says, is the dirty, rotten little secret of it all. The gratitude of colleagues doesn't count. A good salary and a company car don't count. Share options, which are often just a promise of chicken feed, don't count. Nothing counts but what you own. He tells another gripping story. In the early days of his company, 4 of his key employees, a senior manager, a publisher, a designer, and an editor, confronted him. They were polite, but their message was an ultimatum. They pointed out that he owned 100% of the company and that they were working just as hard as he was. They demanded 20% of the company, shared between them. It was only fair, they said. If he refused, they would all resign immediately and set up as direct rivals. What would you do? Your company might fail without them. They're your friends, your colleagues. Handing over 20% seems like a small price to pay to keep the peace and keep your business afloat. Felix Dennis fired them. On the spot. He said he would run the entire company himself, write the articles, design the pages, answer the phones, before he would part with a single, solitary share. Not for fairness. Not for loyalty. And certainly not for moral blackmail. They left and started their rival company. It failed. 2 of them eventually came back to work for him. None of them ever got rich. Dennis calculated what that 20% would have been worth over the next 30 years in dividends and asset value. The number was $80 million. That is the relentless mathematics of ownership. The best kind of fairness, he argues, is the kind that makes a lot of money. Then, you can decide what to do with it. But while you are in money-making mode, fairness has nothing to do with it. This principle of ownership is so powerful that it even dictates how you should approach negotiation. Here, Dennis introduces another one of his famous analogies, the elephant and the flea. You, as a startup entrepreneur, are the flea. The big, established corporation in your industry is the elephant. The elephant is powerful, but it has a weakness. It has a master, a mahout, who is an unforgiving institutional investor. This mahout demands growth, and is terrified of missing out on the next big thing. Your tiny company, the flea, might be that next big thing. The elephant is concerned that his master will hear about your little idea and punish him for not having thought of it himself. So, the elephant comes to you, the flea. Not because he wants to, but because his fear of his master drives him. And the day he comes to call is the day the fun begins. Dennis recounts the most important negotiation of his life. In 1981, his magazine, Personal Computer World, was the leader in a new, exploding market. But a failed side project had left his company desperately short of cash. An elephant, a massive publishing company called VNU, came calling. They wanted to buy his magazine. Their first offer was magnificent. Far more than he ever dreamed of. But Dennis sensed their need was greater than his greed. He knew that for VNU, a giant in traditional mainframe computer magazines, missing out on the personal computer revolution would be a catastrophic failure in the eyes of their investors. This was their unique weakness. So, he played a dangerous game. At a big meeting, they offered him over $5 million. He looked them in the eye, emptied his mind, and convinced himself he didn't care about the outcome. "The price is $7.8 million, he said, and then he and his lawyer stood up and walked out. His lawyer was horrified. "You're mad," he said. "You've been stupid. They will never pay that." But Dennis understood the balance of weakness. Their need would outweigh his greed. He was right. A few weeks later, they met again and agreed to his price. He became a multi-millionaire overnight, precisely because he understood that in a negotiation, it's not about the balance of strength, it's about the balance of weakness. Once you have mastered these principles, harnessing fear, focusing on execution, obsessing over ownership, and mastering negotiation, you will start to make real money. But this leads to a new set of problems. As Dennis says, getting rich is the easy part. The hard part is staying rich. Here, the book takes a turn, offering advice from a man who has made every mistake imaginable. He speaks with shocking honesty about the first flush of wealth, the madness that grips you when you suddenly have more money than you know what to do with. He admits to spending over $100 million in a single decade on what he calls high-class whores, drink, and consolatory debauchery. He warns that this phase is almost unavoidable. You will buy the big house, the fast cars, the gold taps. But the sooner you get it out of your system, the better. That lifestyle nearly killed him, landing him in the hospital with a life-threatening illness. It was only this brush with death that jolted him back to reality. His most profound advice for staying rich is counterintuitive: give it away. He argues that the faster you give your money away, to friends, charities, good causes, the more will flow back to you. Not because of some cosmic karma, but for a practical reason. You spend less time and energy defending your pile of gold, and more time making more of it. It frees you from the paranoia and fear that afflicts so many wealthy people. He also warns that your oldest friends are your only true friends. New people will come into your life, but you will never know if they are drawn to you or to your money. The only people you can truly trust are those who knew you before you were wealthy. And finally, he makes a passionate case for the power of delegation. To get rich, you need a talent for one thing: the ability to identify, hire, and nurture other people with talent. Specifically, people who are smarter than you. If you are the smartest person in your company, you are in deep trouble. Once you hire that talent, you must delegate. Real delegation. You must give them the responsibility and the autonomy to do great things. Your job is not to be the best digger in the mine, shoveling more coal than anyone else. Your job is to lead, to point the way, and then to get out of the way. It was only when Felix Dennis stopped trying to do everything himself and started trusting the brilliant people he had hired that his wealth truly began to accumulate. He devised a system of vetoes. He is the chairman of his companies, but he does not run them day to day. His managers are free to do whatever they want, as long as they don't violate a short list of rules, such as selling a major asset or moving the headquarters, without his express permission. This gives him control, but also freedom. The freedom to pursue his passions, like planting a massive forest in the heart of England. Ultimately, How to Get Rich is less a how-to manual and more a psychological roadmap. It's a book about transforming yourself from prey into a predator. About understanding that wealth is a game, and to win, you must be willing to play by its brutal, often uncomfortable rules. You must be willing to cut loose from the crowd, to face down your fears, and to fight for every single percentage point of ownership. As he concludes, the world is full of money. Some of that money has your name on it. All you have to do is collect it. Commentary. Reading How to Get Rich is like sitting down for a long, boisterous, and sometimes shocking conversation with a wealthy, eccentric, and brutally honest uncle. Felix Dennis doesn't just give you advice, he tells you stories stained with failure, regret, and the hard-won wisdom of a life lived at full throttle. What makes this book so powerful, and so different from almost any other book on the subject, is its complete lack of pretense. Dennis doesn't pretend that getting rich is a noble pursuit. He doesn't sugarcoat the sacrifices or the psychological toll. He tells you plainly that it requires a level of focus, ruthlessness, and self-belief that most people simply do not possess, and perhaps shouldn't aspire to. The most profound lesson, for me, isn't about a specific business strategy. It's about the stark difference between desire and compulsion. Many of us desire to be wealthy. We fantasize about what we would do with the money. But desire is fleeting. It's a wish that floats away when the bus comes along. Compulsion is different. Compulsion is a fire in your gut. It's the engine that drives you when you're exhausted, when you've failed, when everyone around you is telling you to give up. Dennis forces you to look in the mirror and ask yourself, honestly, do I have that compulsion, or am I just a wannabe? His mantra of ownership, 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 is a truth that cuts through all the noise of modern business culture. In an age of collaborative economies and team-oriented success, his message is a cold, hard reminder that in the game of wealth, the person who owns the assets is the one who wins. It's not about being fair, it's about understanding the rules of the system. But the book is not without its soul. For all its talk of being a predator and a killer, there is a deep undercurrent of humanity. His ultimate conclusion? That the purpose of getting rich is to buy yourself the time to pursue your passions, and then to give the money all away, is a beautiful and surprising resolution. It reframes the entire quest. It suggests that the accumulation of wealth isn't the endgame. It's merely a phase you must pass through to achieve true freedom. So, how can you start applying these lessons today? First, analyze your need. Take a piece of paper and write down why you want to be wealthy. Is it a vague desire for comfort, or is there a burning, specific reason? A compulsion? Be brutally honest with yourself. If the compulsion isn't there, Dennis would tell you to save yourself the trouble and find a different path. Second, start practicing the art of execution. Pick one small, simple idea. It doesn't have to be a business idea. It could be a personal project. Instead of just thinking about it, spend the next week ruthlessly executing it. Focus on the doing, not the dreaming. This builds the muscle of execution, which is far more valuable than the muscle of ideation. And third, begin to see the world through the lens of ownership. The next time you're at work, or looking at a business, ask yourself, who owns this? Who is truly capturing the value being created here? Just changing your perspective to focus on ownership will fundamentally change how you see opportunities. That was a summary of How to Get Rich by Felix Dennis. We've journeyed through the core of his philosophy today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary can only ever be a map. The real treasure is found when you walk the path yourself. The true magic of this book happens in the quiet moments, when one of Felix's raw, unfiltered stories strikes a chord in a way you didn't expect. This summary is designed to help you decide if this journey is one you want to take. If anything we've talked about today has sparked a fire in you, then grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning, it's an experience that might just change the way you see yourself, your ambition, and your place in the world. A link to the book is in the description. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel. That way, you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep growing and learning together.